Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Ian Bruce and this is Interviews from Quito, the programme where we explore some of the big challenges facing this country and the region. In today's programme, global warming. Can we keep it to 1.5 degrees Celsius and what happens if we don't? A new report from UN scientists says the world is way off that target of the Paris Agreement and warns of catastrophic consequences. So how does that look from Ecuador in Latin America? To talk about this, we're very pleased to have with us Natalia Greene, one of the country's leading environmentalists, who helped to make Ecuador the first, and so far the only country, to enshrine the rights of nature in its constitution. But first, let's take a look at this video.
A UN report has confirmed that the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement are unachievable. In fact, global climate is on track for an increase of 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. An urgent transformation of world economy is required to avoid global chaos. A UN landmark report warns time is running out to avoid disaster. The Earth's surface has warmed on 1 degree Celsius, enough to lift oceans and unleash deadly storms, floods and droughts.
Limiting global warming to 1.5 compared to 2 degrees would reduce the number of people exposed to climate-related risks and susceptible to poverty by up to several hundred millions by 2050.
Carbon dioxide emissions would need to decline substantially before 2030 to avoid warming of more than 1.5 degrees C in the middle of the 21st century, followed by large-scale carbon dioxide removal.
Natalia, thank you very much for being with us. Now, we've had a whole series of reports in recent years from this panel of scientists from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of the UN. They all make quite grim reading. So let's start by saying, what exactly is new in this new report?
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk here. Climate change is a very fascinating topic because it's an issue that we all need to solve it. It's not something that a little government is gonna solve. It's something that it requires everybody's attention. And the IPCC is a panel, the Intergovernmental Panel, that gathers the most important scientists all over the world. And unfortunately, every time they give us a report, they always fail, in the sense that each year we realize that what they said was very conservative, and what ends up happening is much worse. So what's new in this report? October 6th was the date that was in this report. This new report was launched. This was something that was asked to the IPCC after the Paris Agreement. It was something that was asked to figure out what was the difference between the 1.5 degrees and the 2 degrees Celsius regarding what's really going to happen and what's going to happen with species and everything. What's new in this report? Well, not a lot, in the sense that we know that we're in a crisis, we're in an environmental crisis and we need to do something to solve it. Something that really got my attention is that the Paris Agreement always said that we want to aim for the 2 degrees and hopefully for the 1.5 degrees. And this report is already giving us a date. So it's saying if we keep on doing what we're doing, we're reaching the 1.5 degrees from 2030, and if we do a little bit from 2052. And we're gonna definitely overpass that limit.
And that by the end of the century, if we go on as we are, we could be 3 or 4%.
Well,
3 or 4 degrees. Right?
There are some studies that show that if we don't do anything until 2100, we could reach even 7 degrees. So it's a range from like 3 to 7, but that means, you know, we're in a really chaos. We're in a mess, and we need to do something to solve it. So what this report is interesting is that it's saying, for example, that it's going to impact more something that we already knew, the Arctic regions, for example, that is going to impact biodiversity. It gives you sort of like an estimate if it's highly probable or low, if it's highly probable or not that an event is going to happen. So it's giving you those probabilities, but it's pretty much telling you what we know. And what we know is that even though the countries came together in Paris and they signed the Paris Agreement and everybody signed the INDCs, and they now have the NDCs that are the national determined contributions, with that, that's not going to be enough. We're definitely going to overpass the 1.5 degrees, we're going to overpass the 2 degrees, and we need to do something fast.
But is that aspect new? Because it says very clearly, doesn't it, that the countries that signed up to Paris are way, way short of meeting even their own targets.
Yeah. That's not new. We knew that. I remember The Economist launched a report, I think it was 2 years ago, already saying that we have a big gap in what we want to achieve and what we're aiming to achieve with the INDC. So that's not new. Something that I found that was new and that was interesting was this idea of the net zero carbon dioxide. So it's saying the only way that we can do something to mitigate climate change and to actually try to revert the tendency of temperature growth is to achieve this net zero carbon dioxide. That means that whatever we emit, we have to remove from the earth. So it's not only that we need to mitigate and we need to lower the emissions, but we need to do more to remove the carbon dioxide that we're putting into the atmosphere. So that I found that was a bit interesting.
So that's really the whole issue of negative emissions technologies, isn't it?
Yes, although...
Which I wanted to come on to in a moment, so maybe we just park that aside for a second. Because I wanted to ask you, if we look at these different scenarios that the IPCC is painting, 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, or something 3 degrees or more by the end of the century, what does that mean in human terms? For your children, probably still alive, for my grandchildren maybe, in what, 80 years' time?
Well, you can imagine that from 2006 to 2015, we have raised 0.87 degrees Celsius. And you've seen already the chaos that is happening. All the natural disasters, I say natural because they're not natural, they are a consequence of anthropocentric activities. So all of these disasters are already happening. Remember that the world doesn't mean we have an average of 1.5 degrees, but the world is not going to get warmer the same way. So some places are going to get much more warmer. So if we say an average of 0.87, it means that some places in Africa or even in the Arctic, it means more than 1.2 degrees already. So that's very severe, and already we are living the sixth mass extinction of species. So what's going to happen with 1.5 degrees? I think that have not realized as human beings that our own existence is in peril. And we really need to,
Do you think, after all these years and all these reports, do you think people really don't understand that? Or they just don't want to do anything?
Yeah, unfortunately, it works like when you are boiling some water, So when you're boiling water, you don't see the effects instantaneously. So what we're looking at right now with climate change is what our parents produced many years ago, or like 20, 30 years ago. So what we're doing right now is what our children are going to notice in the future. So unfortunately, the actions that are happening right now, it doesn't matter that the experts are telling us that something really severe is happening because we don't see it every day. We see that the temperature is changing, that it's raining more than often, or it's warmer than often. Here in Quito, for example, you know that we need to wear some more sunscreen, wear a hat, but it's not really impacting our life so severely.
But it is for some people.
It is for some people, and it is for island people that are losing their whole territories. It is for farmers that are losing their crops. It is for people who live, for example, in Africa or some places that are getting more warmer than other places. And I see it as a plane, for example. We are taking out pieces. We're taking a seat. We're taking a little part of the wing. We're taking pieces out of this plane. We don't know at which point the plane is going to stop working and it's not going to be able to fly anymore. So that's what we're doing. We don't see the big effect because it hasn't had such an impact that everybody realizes it's a chaos. But it's just an issue of getting informed and figuring out that we really need to do something to revert the situation because the whole human species is in peril.
You mentioned this thing about zero...
net zero emissions.
Net zero emissions. And if I understand that correctly, one of the possibly new things, well, I don't know how new it is, but it was new to me anyway when I was looking at the summary of this report, is this idea of actually overshooting the 2 degrees. So there's a sort of now introduced an idea, well, maybe we won't quite be able to get there, on time. So we'll go kind of beyond 2 degrees, and then we'll have all these wonderful new technologies coming in, which are going to suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and will bring the temperature back down towards the end of the century. How do you see that?
Well, I see that, as one of those myths that we need to break. Because when you see the graphs, the temperature is going up, and even if we try our best, it's going to reach the 1.5 degrees. And what experts say is that what we need to try to do is what you're saying, that it reaches 1.5 or 2 degrees, then we'll stabilize the temperature, and then it will go down. But I don't think that's going to happen with technology. I think that every time, like climate skeptics and many people say, technology is going to save us, or the governments are going to save us, they're going to do something. But we are causing climate change with our actions, with our driving our car, with heating our stoves, with everything that we do. So it's really an action that is a collective action to try to do something. And I really don't trust technology in the sense that...
Why not?
Because we're not going to the source of the problem. It's not enough. People are saying that, some people are even thinking of going to Mars to live because, they've realized that the Earth is not going to survive. And some people are trusting that this technology of like shooting into the clouds or something is going to save us. But first of all, that's not enough. And second of all, it's still in our hands because it's not a problem. I think that with climate change, we've gone into this issue of talking about carbon dioxide. That is something so unreal. We cannot touch carbon dioxide, but we can touch the oil that we put in our cars. So the thing is that technology, or this idea that technology is going to save us, sort of tells us that there's a big being or an administration or a government that is going to come and save us, when we are causing a problem with driving our cars again.
But just take a specific example. I mean, one of the main technologies seems to be this sort of capture and storage, or there are various different versions of it.
Yeah.
One, I believe, now using biofuels, supposedly producing biofuels, which will then, just give it, but maybe our audience don't know much about this, so just give us a quick idea of what the proposal is here with this capture and storage, and what you think.
There are many proposals because there are many things happening with technology. One of them is like shooting into the clouds so it will rain more. Another one is this capturing of CO2. They have, for example, even some projects of tech forests that will capture carbon dioxide. But what we really don't know, and that's why I was mentioning the idea of Rigths of Nature, because nature is much more efficient than what we'll ever be. So our forests are much more efficient than any technology that's going to come. So the best thing that we can do is protect our forests, stop deforestation, instead of trying to do something to capture CO2. Our oceans and our forests are much more effective than what we are. So why don't we do something to protect those? I'm going to give you an example of New Orleans that was very impacted me a lot. When they were doing doing the mangroves, they were building all this technology for drilling oil. They pretty much cleared all the. It's not the mangroves; it's the wetlands of New Orleans. And to replace the wetlands, they made these huge walls of concrete that cost millions of dollars, thinking that that will be able to stop the hurricanes. And then Katrina came and it destroyed New Orleans, And it showed that it doesn't matter how much money you put into technology or human solutions, capital solutions will never replace natural solutions.
That's a really important distinction, isn't it? And I think by and large, of course, there are a whole gamut of opinions in Latin America, but the environmental movement in Latin America seems to be not very, has little trust in these sort of techno fixes, basically, and has a different alternative, which is about a different relationship with nature.
It's a different relationship with nature. It's understanding that we are part of nature, that we need to change our relationship, and it's not only an issue that oil, burning fossil fuels is bringing on climate change into the world, but also there are communities, real communities living in the rainforest who are living the consequences of that oil drilling. So it's a whole, this whole system that is wrong. So if we want to perpetuate that system and say, don't touch my life, I like to keep on living, this life of like, I'm just closing my eyes, I want to live wealthy, keep on consuming, I'm not going to understand what's happening in the world, and then I'm going to earn enough money to make this technology to save the world. That's unreal. That's insensitive even with all of those people that are right now already living the consequences of that system, of those people who do not want to change their lifestyle, because it's only an issue of changing the lifestyle.
Okay, but let's be more specific. Changing lifestyle is a bit general. What concretely must we do?
I do believe in the change of the system. So it's an issue of changing capitalism, in changing a system of infinite accumulation, changing a system where governments, for example, if you see elections, they're always telling you, I'm going to develop the country. Development, money, growth. Why are we thinking of infinite growth in a finite planet where we have finite resources? We need to change this system. So it's not an issue of continuing this accumulation of capital and things and resources and plastic, because the planet is not going to be able to tolerate this. Remember that it's not an issue only of climate change. We have really overpassed and overshoot many of the planet limits, as the Stockholm Research Institute shows us. That we have overshoot the limit of nitrogen, for example, in our soil, with all the fertilizers that we're using for our food. We have, of course, have an overshoot with carbon dioxide. We have an overshoot regarding biodiversity, because we've reached the limit where biodiversity cannot really adapt to this weather, so it's dying and it's changing. The report actually gives us a rate, and it says that half of the geographical climates are going to be changed so dramatically that the species are not going to be able to live in those areas any longer. So the problem is not only climate change. If it will be something very small, like when we had the hole in the ozone layer, that was something that was caused by sprays and by the gases of the fridges, and that was something that was able to control by controlling 5, 6, 7 companies in the world. Right now, it's a system change that we need.
I don't want to get too far off track, but I think some people, maybe the thinking about species extinction is perhaps not that clear to many people. They think, well, a few less species of monkeys in the Ecuadorian Amazon is not really going to make much difference to me.
Well, it's not so few species. We're talking about the 6 mass extinction in the world. We're talking that every day we lose species, and in countries like Ecuador, we only know 5% of our species that live in Ecuador. So we are taking the species into extinction even before we learn about them. So it's really fast. It's happening really fast. And as humans, we are really fragile. As I'm saying, we have, we think that we are superior and that we are here and that nature is our object and that we use it as a resource. But as someone was saying in this last symposium was mentioning, it's not a resource, it's a source, and it's a whole changing of the relationship with nature that we need to do to understand that it's not only an issue of climate change, that technology is not going to save us, that we need to start saving ourselves.
I mean, you've done a lot of work on the rights of nature.
Yeah.
That's one of your main areas now. In fact, I believe you played quite an active part in getting the rights of nature written into the Ecuadorian constitution 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. How does that, what role does that play in this alternative vision?
Well, when we were talking about technology, we always think that also governments are going to save us, or the UN, And the UN, as you see, the IPCC is pretty much telling us the same thing. It's telling us we are in deep problem, we need to do something about it. And I truly believe in the power of civil society, what civil society can do. 10 years ago in Ecuador, we were able to recognize the rights of nature. And it's only now, in 10 years after, that we evaluate what has happened since. And what has happened since is that we have 25 cases of rights of nature in Ecuador. Countries like New Zealand, Sweden, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, US, everywhere in the world, rights of nature is sort of happening. And there's a whole movement.
Happening in what sense?
There are recognitions in local ordinances, there are recognitions in national laws, there are the recognitions of the river, for example, the Wanganui River in New Zealand or the Atrato River in Colombia. They're getting a recognition of personhood. So we are understanding that we need to change our relationship with nature in many different ways. So yes.
But give me some examples. Okay, let's get a bit more concrete, because we talk about changing the relationship with nature, having a more balanced relationship. What does that mean?
So one of the things is that nature has a voice. Nature is alive. Nature has a right to exist. Remember that Ecuador is the first country in the world, and right now is still the only one in its constitution, that recognizes that nature has a right to exist. In the rest of the world, nature is still an object that you can exploit, not a person that you need to protect. So when I'm being really concrete, it's the same way we treated slaves. Slaves were treated as objects. And it's only when they became subjects into the law that the whole relationship started changing. Right now, nature is still a slave. We treat it as an object. We trade with nature. The whole issue of the financialization of nature is right over the table. Whereas when we change the relationship, we understand it's a person and we put it in the table. For example, to understand that before doing a big project, we need to understand if nature is going to be able to regenerate itself, for example. Then we can figure out if we can do the project or not. You know, so it's a whole different issue.
But is it just about big projects, or is it about a much more fundamental change in the way we live? I mean, you know, I don't have my smartphone on me now, but I'm sure you've got one. I've got one over there. Yeah. You know, all the things that went into making that smartphone, which you and I depend on every day. You know, the lithium and all the rest of the components. What are we going to do without that?
Wouldn't you be really happy if your smartphone lasted for 10 years instead of 2? And that's not a decision that you are making, it's a decision that the companies are making. So
we still have smartphones, but they'll last longer.
Yeah, so a planned obsolescence is something that is part of this system, of this capitalist system that is making you change your phone every 2 years, or every 1 year, or every maximum 3 years. So yes, we are going to still depend on technology. I think that we can use technology in our best interest, use computers, use smartphones in our best interest. Right now is an area of communication. So all these ideas of rights of nature and permaculture and alternative energies and all these things that are happening that are real, that real people are doing right now because there are real solutions, not happening from the IPCC or the United Nations, but that are happening right now, are coming to us through technology, through information. So I think we should use that, but we need to pressure those companies as consumers that we cannot be using so much minerals, for example, for all of these. 85% of all the gold has already been taken out of the soil. It's already in banks and in jewelries. So, you know, we should start digging for gold anymore. So there is a whole system change that needs to happen. And that's what we need to understand with climate change, that is not only an issue of the scientists and carbon dioxide and things that we don't understand. It's really an issue of like oil, the light that we're using, you know, the transportation that we're using, the materials that we're buying, every decision that you take when you go to a grocery shop. All of those decisions matter.
But there's another contradiction there, isn't there? I mean, several of the countries that have actually done most to push, for example, the rights of nature, you know, and a system change rather than, you know, simply a technological fix, are also countries that are hugely dependent on fossil fuels.
Yeah, no,
you know?
definitely.
I mean, Ecuador, not so much as Venezuela, but for example, Ecuador, Venezuela, Bolivia, to take three obvious examples, all quite strong on issues of climate change, climate justice, and so on and so forth, all totally dependent on fossil fuels. What are they going to do without it?
And not only dependent on fossil fuels as a country, but also for exports. So
exactly, no, as the basis of
their
economy.
Even if you don't think about climate change, we only have 10 to 15 more years of oil in Ecuador. You know, we need to think about a transition because we're running out of oil. So even if there was no climate change, we need to stop depending on oil. Oil is a really dirty technology. We need to, and the solutions are already there. It's only these big companies that are. For example, right now we're talking about Chevron Texaco. You know, Chevron is really impeding, for example, some new technologies to appear because they bought some of the patents of like hybrid cars and electric cars very early, so their business wouldn't be touched. So the technologies are already there. What we need to do is really start replacing those technologies. And as Ecuador, of course, we depend on fossil fuels. We cannot change one day to another one. Right now, we are evaluating what has happened in these 10 years. And unfortunately, it's not enough. We wanted to have like a bigger change. It's not enough, for sure. But even if we don't have climate change, we're going to run out of oil. So we need to look for alternatives. And our biodiversity, for example, is one of those alternatives. Tourism is an alternative. Renewable energies is an alternative. And we need to dig into those alternatives for sure.
But just take tourism, for example, you know, that, you know, ecotourism, you know, nice lodges in the Amazon, you know, but you have tourists flying a long distance from rich countries, you know, consuming vast amounts.
And it's an issue of also working with like a plane companies, for example, to talk about their fuel. Jet fuel, for example, is one of the most polluting fossil fuels. So we need to do a lot. And it's not the only solution. There's a lot of like local tourism that it can happen, international tourism as well. But you sound very skeptic about our alternatives. But I'm telling you, they are here and people are doing it. We just need to scale them up. In the
Okay, so all right, they exist. How
They
do you
exist.
scale them up?
First of all, is an issue of technology, technology and information. Using technology to share that information. They exist. They're happening. Our communities are living a different model and a different relation with nature. We need to be able to show that, to scale that up. Most of the population in the world is focused in cities. We need to change how we live in cities. You know,
I mean, I was going to say, because, you know, again, you can, it's kind of easy enough to imagine a sort of different, more harmonious relationship in a rural community in a relatively sparsely populated area. But how do you do that in Sao Paulo or Mexico City?
Well, we don't go so far. What do we do in Quito when we have a river, Machangara River, that is a completely polluted river? Okay, let's go to the sources. Which companies are polluting the river? How do we put more controls into that? We're talking about like ordinances to stop plastic into the city. Okay, let's go do that. You know, there's so many things that you can do in the city, like recycling, conscious education. You can here in Quito, you have spectacle bears right in Pichincha. So there are so many things that you can do of connecting people to nature. First of all, so people will understand and get to know nature.
Do you think there's a problem, partially a problem, amongst the left in Latin America on these questions? And I'm just thinking, you often hear the argument, not just in Latin America, in many parts of the South, essentially, you know, well, you know, this isn't our problem. We didn't make this mess.
Definitely.
It wasn't our fault, and not much we can do to mend it. You know, we'll just wait for, you know, a big green fund to come along and help us adapt to the damage that you lot have done.
Unfortunately, you know? That is a lot of the discourse, and there's all of the carbon debt, saying, you know, countries in the north use all the carbon that they could. They already put in the atmosphere. We need our quota so we can develop. But develop where? You know, the issue of climate change is a little part. You know, we are in a deep mess. That's obvious. You know, temperatures rising, sea levels are rising. You know, the temperature, the polars are melting. We need to do something urgently. But it's not an issue. We're in the same boat. It's not an issue of like only in the north and we keep on developing. Developing where? You know, are we going to mimic the same model of development of the north?
It's about what kind of development?
It's what kind of development? It's like we cannot mimic the same model that brought us to this chaos. That is the model of the north. So it's not an issue of you guys of the north did your stuff, you save us, while we here continue trying to grow and develop
and in that
the
sense,
same
in terms
way.
of a different model of development, it's actually possibly easier, or you're perhaps better positioned to give a lead on that than
exactly, because
some
we
highly
are
industrialized
not,
countries.
Exactly, we are not so far in the sense...
Into the mess.
Into the mess, exactly. We right now, for example, in Ecuador, can still change because we're not so dependent. I can't even... Here in Quito, if the lights go off, you know, you still survive. Remember the mess of what happened to blackout in New York? You know, people in the US or in places in the north don't know what to do anymore without technology. And it's not an issue of technology. We love technology. But it's an issue of like how you relate to nature again. How can you reconcile that relationship? It's very important. And I think that we can do that in places like Latin America. I think that we still have that hope. And that's why we can lead the way.
And just finally, so if you lead the way, can the big polluters follow?
Well, I don't think the big countries will follow. Remember that right now the companies have more of a share in this decision than the countries themselves because they have more money, resource, and power. Like Tesla, you know, they have more power than many countries together. But they can lead the way in the sense that people are really pushing for a change. So I think that China and China and the US are going to be the last to lead. But if we can change enough countries and if we can change enough people within those countries, then a change can happen. And that's why I really truly believe in the power of civil society. Or I want to believe, because I have really young children and I don't want them to see the mess that the IPCC report is showing us.
Natalia, that's a great point to end on. We've come to the end of our time anyway. Thank you so much. We've been talking to Natalia Greene, environmentalist here in Ecuador, about the latest report from the IPCC and what it means for all of us. This is Interviews from Quito. I'm Ian Bruce. Until next time.